Okay, folks, we conclude today chapter 24. Chapter 24 is about disconnection. Well, if we can connect, we can also disconnect. So the disconnect is what we're speaking about. Yesterday we spoke about how is it possible that an individual, well, their soul is connected with God. How is it possible that we could disconnect? So we explained because it's a spirit of folly. In other words, this is a tremendous idea. It's not natural. It's not inherent to the condition, maybe the human condition, but not to the soul's condition, to be disconnected. So I guess it means, what is going to be our condition? Are we going to be have a soulful condition that we live with, or do we live with the human condition? So the human condition, everything is klipa, and therefore the spirit of folly will enter much more easily. If we live with the neshama, so with the soul, then the spirit of folly is extraneous, and it'll make it more difficult to enter, at least. Just a thought of mine. So, but the spirit of folly does enter, and what does it tell us? That through this action, I'm not going to be disconnected. And we learned this from the soita, is what we learned from yesterday. The married woman that is caught with another, or suspect, at least, is what the law is speaking about. But what we're using over here, and the Alter Rebbe is using, that is the terminology kisita ishtai, when she will go astray. And the word going astray is the same word as folly. Tiste and shtus, and the same root word. So going astray is a folly. Folly is going astray from what is our inherent condition of the soul. So the person can make, the Alter Rebbe continues, and we can foolishly think that there is distinctions in a disconnect. Meaning, idolatry will for sure disconnect me, and therefore I'm ready to give up my life. But adultery, not the same. And we make a distinction. And we see that there is a distinction when it comes to pikuach nefesh, when it comes to giving up your life for things. So, for example, for idolatry, you have to give up your life. But for the observance of Shabbos, you don't. So, for example, if there's pikuach nefesh, a person is in danger, their health is in danger, so you're allowed to desecrate the Shabbos. So we see there is a distinction in the various mitzvahs. So you could therefore make this distinction that one mitzvah is really cutting you off, and the other one, if you don't fulfill, look, Shabbos, you're allowed to desecrate it if it's a question of life and death. So the Alter Rebbe explains that no. First of all, that's in the interest of Shabbos, as the Talmud tells us, that if you will desecrate one Shabbos, then you will keep many more Shabboses. So therefore, in the interest of Shabbos, desecrate this Shabbos so you could keep many more. And bottom line is, the Alter Rebbe says, it's really a decree from heaven, and it's not a rational thing, that therefore you can make these distinctions. So what we have over here is, in the act of doing anything that is against the divine will, in that moment, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect. Now, for those who study Torah, know that there's consequences of a disconnect. And the Alter Rebbe now addresses that yes, indeed, there are different consequences from different sins that are done. There are certain sins that there is no, very simply, there's death penalty in Judaism. Very difficult to adjudicate the death penalty, but there is the death penalty. There is kores, person that their life will end earlier than what would have been, like eating chametz on Pesach, for example, eating leavened bread on Passover. So there's such a law. So we see that there is a distinction in sins because we see the punishment is different. So the Alter Rebbe explains that's true, but that's only the consequence of sin. That's not the inherent nature of sin. The inherent nature of sin is disconnect in that very moment from God, period. So whether it's a very horrific thing that has a greater consequence, or it's a simple thing, like speaking ill of another, or entertaining negative thoughts and so on in one's mind. Nonetheless, there's a disconnect in that moment, period, that makes no distinction between one mitzvah and another. How much of a blemish it has on the soul, that's the consequence of the sin. Hence, how much does it need cleansing? Which, by the way, death penalty is a kapara, an atonement, and a cleansing for the soul. All punishments in Torah are not, to get back at the person, as in modern day incarceration is basically, the first and foremost reason is, justice shall be served and we got to get back at this person. That's not divine justice. Divine justice it's a cleansing process. It's a cleansing of the soul. So therefore, whether it's being penalized with lashes or being penalized with early death from divine agency, or by the court of law that there is a death penalty, all of that is because there's a blemish on the soul that needs cleansing, and therefore there's various forms of punishment. But that's the consequence of the sin. We're not talking about that. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. Every sin is equal in the sense that it disconnects us from God in that moment. And if we're sensitive to our soul, you wouldn't want that, because in that moment you are disconnected from God, means the soul that we have, the soul is still holy. So what happened to it? It is in exile. It's in prison. It's not able to exercise and to be itself, so to speak, because it's imprisoned in exile. It always has faith with God. It's always connected. It's not the soul. It's the inner part of the soul is definitely always connected and always has faith with God. But the exterior aspects of the soul are disconnected. Therefore, that's why after you do such a sin, any sin, you can reconnect to God afterwards. So it's a disconnect in the moment, but you can do tshuva and reconnect thereafter. That disconnect, the Alter Rebbe gives a very vivid metaphor for us to understand what we are doing to God in that moment, what we're doing to our soul that moment, that is a piece of God. It's like taking the head of the king and put it into a place of repugnant privy full of filth, like a toilet bowl of you, whatever. In that moment, the next moment, taken out because you're going to do a mitzvah. But in that moment, it's like taking the king's head and putting it, the king's head, which means affecting God himself, and that part of God that was within me, of my soul, the unspeakable humiliation that's to God and to the soul. That is, again, applies to every sin as it's being committed. The consequence of that act is a different story, and that's not the discussion over here. I mean, we did discuss it, but that's not the main point of this sense of folly that a person has, that they feel that they're not being disconnected in that moment. But every sin does that and separates us from God. And if the hidden love doesn't want even that for a moment that we have of God in our soul. That's it. Powerful idea for today. Oh, great, man. Joanne. I know, great to hear. Coming to Montreal in May. I hope for a simcha that we'll have. Let me know. Tony from Costa Rica, good morning. Linda from Nebraska, Boker Tov. Daniel from Cordoba, Argentina. Good morning. Clem from Brisbane. Must be late night. Thank you for joining. Shaheen from New York, good morning. Ashley, good morning. Rick from the Chicago area, welcome. Good afternoon to Eleanor in the Netherlands. And Matthew, good morning. Tim from Texas, good morning. Nordine, good morning. From where? I'm not certain. Wahid from Malta, thank you for joining. Will Eric from California, good morning. Joa from Portugal, thank you for joining. And Tommy from Michigan. Marilyn from Delaware. Galit from Israel. Katya, hello. Hani from England, thank you for joining. All right, I think. And 200876. Thank you for joining. All right, we finished chapter 24. Tomorrow we go into chapter 25, which will bring all of the ideas that we've learned from chapter 18 through 25 into a complete completion. So stay tuned. All more to come. In the meantime, folks, sharing is caring. Plus, for those who are on Instagram, those who are on LinkedIn or Twitter, I have a new account there for 1 minute Tanya daily. Taking everything we learned and put into 1 minute, which is pretty awesome. So please follow me there. I need to get the word out, and I need your help with that, please. Thank you. Linda asked the question, a very good one. And Andrew, good morning. Can tshuva, repentance, that one does after sinning, turn the sin into a mitzvah? Yeah, that we learned that. We have learned that idea previously, and definitely it can. It has to be a very, profound form of tshuva, but yes. Stanley from Youngstown, Ohio, good morning. Matthew, thank you for sharing your thought. And Marjorie from Dania Beach, Florida, good morning. The Instagram and Twitter address, again, is Tanya Rabbi. Thank you, Karen. Tanya Rabbi. That's where you can find me. And please get the word out. That would be really appreciated. Have a wonderful day, everybody. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you Chabad Zurich and Kadeshim, where it's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya every day. Have a wonderful day.